Hey, what's up, guys? Nice here. So, it has been 1 year since I've read the whole story of Ruby, and it's at Arkos shipping, by the way. If you guys don't know that one, if you don't know what last year is, you should watch the whole playlist in the description below so you'll understand what's the whole story of the Arkos. Okay? It's the shipping Arkos, basically. And it's called Incognito. If you guys don't know about that one, you should watch it in the description below. And you can listen to it if you want to. Do you feel like an audiobook or something like that? Let's just get the whole piece, okay? Alright, guys, let's get started where we left off to chapter 9. So, it's been a long time, guys. So, I'm gonna start off with that new chapter. So, bring right to it. Chapter 9. Incognito. There was a small gathering held in Patch for Summer's funeral. The party consisted mainly of close family and friends. They congregated by the escarpment outside of their home, just as Tiny had suggested. Silently, Ruby stood across from her father and uncle overlooking the cliff face, the final resting place for her mother. Her eyes were heavy, accompanied by a perceptible tightness in her chest, as the epitaph engraved into stone all but solidified her greatest fear. Gazing upon her grave, it was if the news, the entire horrific gravity of the situation finally become apparent for Ruby. Her mother was gone, and she was never coming back. Even with this time she had to heal, to try and process the loss, it still wasn't any easier for her to accept. Ruby swallowed, and dry surface of her throat scratching as the procession continued. The quivering in her shoulders was stilled by the warmth of her father's hand as he held her. Her eyes carried upward, catching his face as he offered a soft, comforting smile. She tried weakly to return the gesture, no matter how helpless it seemed. The expression of Tiny's face shifted, the tension coiling in his muscles as his attention was drawn away from the ceremony. Curious, Ruby turned, following her father's line of sight, trying to catch a glimpse of what he was looking at. Among the throng of people surrounding them, however, it was difficult. She curled toes, trying to stand as tall as possible. Crow, Ty muttered lowly, can you keep an eye on the girls for a moment? Of course, Ty. The crowd dispersed for Ty as he moved away, allowing Ruby the chance to watch after him. He was approaching a woman standing outside the party, away from anyone else. Her dark hair and blazing red eyes were disarming and unfamiliar. Yet there was a distinct, recognizable quality about her, in the shape of her face and eyes. She looked almost exactly like Yang. Ruby stood alone in the middle of the wake when her uncle approached, a softness in his usually gruff expression. Oh, hey there, kiddo. Uncle Crow! Ruby's eyes remained set upon the floor beneath her, not looking to her uncle, not one to take acknowledge the mercy celebrations around her. The fond chatter and soft laughter radiating in the background was a sentient she couldn't quite share. She hadn't seen her father, seen the ceremony had ended. Ah, listen, Ruby, if you don't mind, there's someone here who wanted to have a word with you. In all honesty, Ruby did mind. The last thing she wanted was to hold conversation with a distant relative or family friend, watching over her with pity, speaking soft, carefully chosen words as if she may shatter completely beneath the sound, but she needed to turn them down, would seem rude. Sure, she answered, still not looking up. From the way Crow's eyes narrowed, he did not seem convinced by her answer. Deciding, he stepped aside, allowing space for another man to approach. Go ahead, Oz. The sound of an ornate black cane clapping against the floor let Ruby know he was standing before her. Surprised, her eyes lifted to see a man with short silver hair and dark spectacles shading his eyes. Ah, Miss Rose. It's a pleasure to finally meet you. You're Professor Osmond, the headmaster of Beacon Academy, the man said, dipping green. I understand you will begin studying at my school this year. Right. Well, I had planned to, but she trailed off. I see. Sorry to hear that, but I understand. Husband said, his tone solemn. I must offer you my deepest condolences. I know that this can't have been easy for you. Ruby tore the dark fabric of her sleep, an uncomfortable shift in conversation. Noticing her unease, Osmond continued, I knew your mother well, and worked with her on a number of occasions. She was a very admirable woman. I'm sure you're proud of her, that why she left us. It is truly indicative of the kind of person she was. I'm sure it's how she will always be remembered. I I suppose you're right. With him the smile playing at his lips, Osmond's hand lowered to touch her shoulder. As he turned to leave, Ruth's voice rose of its own according. Professor, she began. Osmond's gait slowing to a stop. The reason I signed up for Beacon was because I wanted to be able to follow my mother's footsteps. I wanted to be able to stop something like this from happening again. Osmond nodded, the warmth in his expression encouraging her to continue. What I'm wondering is, well, it's not too late for me to re-enroll, is it? Our doors are always open, Miss Rose. It was a feeling that was still taking time for Pierre to get used to. The touch of John's lips, warm and gentle, against her own. Though the part of her was pleased, she didn't want to lose the sensation that overcame her each time they kissed. It was a familiar warmth tied inherently to his presence, one she only felt in smaller, more sporadic waves before. Because of her similar heights, John had taken a liking to surprising her with quick, chaste kisses, needing only to turn his head slightly to reach her lips. She might have been gazing vacantly into the distance, lost in thought and completely unaware he was even there. Apparently, the way she chewed at her lip made him powerless to resist. Sometimes she would catch his eyes lowering in the midst of conversation, his mouth quirking mischievously as those blue orbs traced the contours of her lips. It would become increasingly difficult for her mind and her tongue to form words, heat rising to her cheeks. Perhaps they might even find themselves standing in the middle of an alleyway in downtown Vale, hopefully out of sight of any passing pedestrians. John had pulled her aside as they were walking home, locking her tightly in his embrace and hotly sticking out her lips. It surprised her how willing and ready he was to offer her such affection, a stark contrast to the awkward hesitance that permeated between them not long before. It was as though there had always existed a desire within him to share such intimacy, one that had surged forth the night they had confessed their feelings for one another. John wasn't normally so bold, or often the one to take initiative, needing at times to be coaxed in the right direction. Perhaps that was part of what made each caress they shared so invigorating to Pyrrha. He didn't need any guidance. He knew her so well, perhaps almost as well as she knew herself. Only when their lungs strained with the need for oxygen did they separate, their gazes holding as they drew in rapid breaths. John's fingers caught in long braid as she had tilted her hair into, having come loose from beneath her cap in the midst of her heat exchange. You know, it's going to take me a while to get used to seeing you like this, he said, his fingers toying experimentally with locks of hair. I don't understand, though. I thought you said you weren't as well known in Vale. Why do you need disguise? It, it's just a precaution, she said, as they stepped out from their hiding place, returning to the streets. I know most people wouldn't expect to find me here, so even if someone thought that they recognized me, they would still have their doubts. Still, I don't want to be careless. Alright, I guess I can understand that. John shrugged. Besides, she added, as their fingers stayed together, this way, I can do this. John smiled, lifting his arm over her shoulder and pulling her against him. It had been difficult for Pierre, living a significant portion of her life under the media's watchful eye. As a teenager, she hadn't harbored romantic feelings for anyone other than John. Yet, if she had, she couldn't imagine she would have been able to find the nerves to act on them, knowing that she was scrutinized. It was part of made her so bashful and hesitant, even now. She had been deprived the freedom to simply live her life. She had almost lost sense of how to let go and cast herself carelessly to the wind. During her teenage years, a point of her life that is often shaped by making mistakes, learning from them and growing. Pierre had never had a chance to step out of line and fall. Now the mere thought of it terrified her. You know, it's actually kind of cool hiding out like this, like we're on a cover or something. John chuckled. Not that anyone would want to take a picture of me. I'm way too boring. Perry glanced forward, beneath wisping from her lips in a soft exhale. It was sad, in a way, in how their lives and their experiences differed so greatly, yet they both seemed to long for what the other had, as though neither could bring them happiness, as though there would always be a part of them that sought out and focused on the negative, on what was missing, rather than what was there. John looked into her old in awe and excitement, his wide-eyed naivety helping to remind her of the good fortune that a life in the public eye had afforded her. "You're right," Perry answered, smiling wistfully. "I suppose when you put it that way, it's rather exciting." Weiss looked up from her scroll with a frustrated sigh. Her gaze carried over the bare, white walls surrounding her. She hadn't heard from her father since she arrived in Vale. Not a single call or voicemail to even check if she had arrived safely. A deliberate move on his part, she assumed. That rang of passive-aggressive manipulation, perhaps a way of punishing her for all the times she had screened his calls. Though what her father didn't seem to understand was that Wise was genuinely worried, still in the dark as to what was happening with the White Fang. Surely he could put his ego aside in order for her find peace of mind. It would be nice to hear how things were developing back at home. She was growing tired of having to learn how their family was faring secondhand, though broadcasts shown on the news. Still, at least this time he hadn't cut off of her allowance. Settling her scroll down, Wise slumped back against the couch, her posture unbecoming of an heiress to a Sneak dynasty. Pierre had gone out for the day, leaving her trapped alone in this drab, empty apartment. Wise supposed she could go outside, but didn't feel particularly comfortable wandering around the unfamiliar city. She knew the White Fang had members stationed out in Vale and didn't want to risk being recognized. Staying up, Wise moved to collect the small pile of mail by the front door, one that had arrived for her in a day. She had hoped that perhaps looking through it might be able to shed some light on the issue. She hadn't had a chance to update her address yet, and had asked for Klein to send it through. Sifting through a small stack of letters, Wise froze when she saw the picture adorning the front of the local Minstrelsy Times. She had been tempted to skip over it, initially not at all interested in the fluffy gossip piece, until she noticed the young woman in the picture. She almost hadn't recognized her, from the way her hair was tied back and tucked away beneath a dark cap to the casual, loose-fitting clothes. She had done quite well in hiding herself. It was so pedestrian, completely unlike the image normally presented of her in the public eye, that any attention she may have garnered was dulled. Anyone familiar with her likely would brush off the resemblance as just that, resemblance alone. Still, it seemed the disguise hadn't been enough to fool one journalist, one person actively seeking her out. If the way the shot was perfectly framed and in focus indicate anything, they must have been staking her out, waiting for the perfect moment to act. That in itself was suspicious. Had they known that she was here in Beacon? As far as the public were concerned, her career had been put on a temporary hiatus. The project she had taken on with the Schnee Dust Company was meant to have been kept under wraps. It was not unusual for her picture to grace the front cover of a magazine alongside speculation about her private life. But this article was different. It wasn't rooted in baseless rumor or speculation. The photograph was concrete and damning. Pira leaving their apartment hand in hand with another man. Actually, this flapper here has been so distracted. I just don't even like this one. When you see the little backstage right here, it's just really bad. It sucks. But still had to live with this way. Adds a lot of like unlockness to anything. But it's a good thing to have back. But hopefully next chapter is going to be a little more incisive to what was going on with between those two, Pyrrha and John. I don't know what's going to happen, but I can't wait. Fanfiction is made by Spider-M. You could follow that on Tumblr, and that's it. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'm gonna see you guys in the next video. Bye, everybody.